Hello and welcome to our edition of Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Let's start with the headlines. 5 aid workers are killed in Sudan on their way to deliver food to the besieged city of El Fasher. The conflict has now reached a new milestone, driving more than 4 million people to flee. Amnesty International says Tanzania needs to be held accountable after 2 activists from Uganda and Kenya detailed torture and sexual abuse after being detained in Dar es Salaam. Local elections in Burundi are set for June 5th, but fears of a repeat of the 2015 political crisis persist, especially among journalists. They were among the first to flee during the government's crackdown on protests. Sudan continues to face one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The UN Refugee Agency now says more than 4 million have fled the country since the conflict began 2 years ago. And today, aid groups warn that many survivors lack proper shelter due to funding shortages. Emily Boyle has more.
It has been months since the alarm was first raised in Sudan, but conditions for refugees show no signs of improving. People are fleeing the war-torn country in hopes of finding food and shelter. But what is now sometimes known as the world's worst humanitarian crisis has just reached a devastating new milestone.
As of yesterday, 4 million people now have fled to Sudan into neighboring country since the start of the war, now in its 3rd year. The 4 million people, a devastating milestone in what is the world's most damaging displacement crisis at the moment.
Humanitarian organizations are struggling to provide the assistance needed due to the unprecedented scale of the emergency and a devastating budget crisis precipitated by the disappearance of American funding.
Without a significant increase in funding, life-saving assistance cannot be delivered at the scale and at the speed that is required. More than 800,000 refugees more has crossed into Chad, bringing the total of refugees, the total of Sudanese refugees in Chad to 1.2 million.
While 4 million people have been displaced into neighboring countries, almost 13 million are internally displaced. International organizations have been working in extremely difficult conditions. The upcoming rainy season threatens to make access complicated in many regions, and the security context remains extremely dangerous. On Tuesday, an aid convoy carrying food in the region of North Darfur was attacked, and 5 aid workers were killed.
And regarding that attack Emily Boyle just mentioned there, the United Nations is now calling for an investigation. 5 workers were killed trying to deliver that much-needed food to children and families who face starvation in a besieged city of El Fasher. UN chief spokesperson says the perpetrators are to be held to account. Let's have a listen.
I can tell you that we, of course, condemn in the strongest possible terms this horrendous act of violence against humanitarian personnel who literally put their lives at risk. This joint WFP-UNICEF convoy was made up of 15 trucks, and it had traveled over 1,800 kilometers from Port Sudan, and they were carrying nutrition supplies and food. The agencies were negotiating access to complete their journey to El Fasher when it was attacked. The route that the convoy was going to take was shared in advance with the parties on the ground who were notified and aware of the location of the trucks. This was the first UN humanitarian convoy that was going to make it to El Fasher in over 1 year.
Kenyan rights groups demand accountability and justice after Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan Akada Atuere say they were detained and tortured by Tanzanian authorities. Mwangi broke down in tears at a press conference in Nairobi as he recounted brutal treatment, including sexual torture at the hands of Tanzanian security forces, which he said left him broken.
Around 6:30 or maybe some few minutes after 6, some guy came who said he was from the state office or state security, and he started beating me up. I was being beaten at the presence of my lawyers and Agatha. He started calling me saying that I'm an inmate, I'm coming to destroy their country, and I'm a problem, they're going to teach me a lesson. And then he said that we're under arrest. So we were put on an upside position where my legs were up like this, my body's up, I'm stuck naked. And then they started beating my feet. So they would beat me and massage my feet. Beat me and massage my feet. I was screaming so hard, I couldn't even, there was no tears coming out because of how painful it was. And one of them said, put his hand in his mouth. So they put my hand in my mouth. Then they would tell me, stop screaming, the kids are sleeping. Say you're feeling nice, say you're feeling good. Then they say Asante Samia, Asante Samia. So I say Asante to their president. Then they'll push hard and then pull it out again.
Now, Uganda military authorities said 2 people died before executing a suspected explosive attack near a Catholic shrine in the capital, Kampala. The deceased were a man and a woman on a passenger motorcycle. The female passenger appeared to explode as a group of security forces tracking the duo drew near the suspects.
It was an issue of intelligence which was surveilling criminally intended elements who wanted to disrupt worshipping at this site. So as a result, our deployment was too high, the surveillance was too high. They thought they were going to get any advantage of fulfilling their mission, only to be put out of action by our security.
And now to Burundi, the media landscape has yet to fully recover from the political crisis of 2015. Journalists were among the first to flee during the government's crackdown on protests against then-President Pierre Nkurunziza's controversial third term. Today, as local elections are set for June 5th, many say fear still hangs over the press. One Burundian journalist spoke to our correspondent, Juliette Montilly, on condition of anonymity.
You'll be hearing less and less about investigative journalism in Burundi. That's the stark warning from a journalist we met here in Bujumbura. He asked to remain anonymous, not only for his safety, but so he could speak openly. Burundi once boasted one of the most dynamic media landscapes in the region. But since the political crisis of 2015, things have changed. Threats, attacks, arbitrary arrests, these are no part of the job. Journalists in Burundi work and live under constant pressure. Many now fear for their lives.
If someone dares to beat you in broad daylight, what's to stop them from going as far as taking your life? That can happen at any moment here. No one is safe.
A real and constant threat met with judicial impunity. Take the case of Jean Bigirimana, a journalist with Iwachu who was forcibly disappeared in 2016. He's never been seen again. And now, with local elections underway in Burundi, tensions are even higher.
It's no longer just local officials. The National Council for Communication, for example, or even security forces. Now you also have members of political parties, and especially the ruling party, who are overzealous. They carry out actions that are unacceptable and illegal.
In April, a journalist from Bonesha Radio was abducted and severely beaten, allegedly by members of the ruling party's youth militia, the Imbonerakure. That attack sparked a rare show of unity. 8 Burundian media outlets each issued a joint statement condemning the violence, the first united front in a decade. A small but significant step towards solidarity among journalists. Because it's not all bleak, the thirst for information is strong among Burundians. And with the rise of digital tools, some journalists are finding ways to bypass state controls. But a new threat looms for the Burundian media ecosystem. Money, as international donors on whom it heavily relies, are scaling back their support.
Extreme weather events have rocked Madagascar over the last 6 months. First came the drought, then the cyclone. Rural communities largely dependent on agriculture have been particularly hard hit. NGOs have raised the alarm about the looming threat of famine. In February alone, close to 8,000 children suffering from severe acute malnutrition were identified in the country's Grand Sud region. The situation has since been exacerbated by the suspension of USAID funds aimed at supporting food security. Report by Gael Borgia.
Scenes like this have become the new normal in this region of Madagascar. This stretch of farmland was ravaged by millions of crickets in just a few minutes. This mother of three is trying in vain to save her rice field.
It began earlier this month and hasn't stopped. We need to get rid of the crickets because we don't have anything more to eat.
When Cyclone Hans struck this area in March, it left behind pockets of humidity, creating perfect conditions for cricket larvae to proliferate. In the past 6 months, first the cyclone and then drought have imperiled the harvests of thousands of farmers. At the start of the year, 8,000 children were registered as suffering from severe acute malnutrition here in the Grand Sud, figures equivalent to those observed in the 2021 famine. ASSOS, a Malagasy NGO supported by Médecins du Monde and Action Against Hunger, launches interventions in communities when 5 or more children are identified as suffering from severe acute malnutrition. In this village, they found 17.
We are deploying a mobile clinic further west where conditions are catastrophic. Specifically, around 100 children were suffering from severe acute malnutrition. The suspension of USAID funds has impacted this project, affecting about a quarter of our activities.
After the suspension of USAID funds, Action Against Hunger closed 2 offices in Madagascar and had to fire 200 staff at a time when more than 1 million Malagasy are in need of humanitarian aid in the south of the country. In this commune of 11,000 people, the local government has called on national authorities to intervene, to no avail.
The state is not worried about us. We are dying because of the lack of aid. We don't even have houses to live in anymore. Everything has been destroyed, especially agriculture. The damage caused by the cyclone has not been fixed. Then the drought came. We haven't had rain since the cyclone.
Between 2020 and 2022, famine, caused in large part by climate change, led to hundreds of deaths. In light of dwindling development assistance, NGOs say the next tragedy could be just around the corner.
Gail Borges' report from Madagascar, ending our edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching. More news coming up.